Intellectual content of the Buddhist experience. Having elucidated to a certain extent, though not so exhaustively as a thorough survey of the LṳNG-GIA may require, as regards its general contents and especially the nature of the inmost consciousness of the Tathagatan known as Pratyatmaryanagokara, let us now proceed to see what intellectual equipment is needed for a bodhisattva before he can attain to this inner realization so emphatically acclaimed in the sutra. This intellectual equipment, consisting of two parts, logical and psychological, is in a way the philosophical content of the intuitive experience attained by the bodhisattva. It may be regarded either as the intellectual attitude to be acquired by him before he enters upon the path of Buddhist discipline, or as the philosophy of what he has realized, which as a rational being he is to elaborate later on. In either case, the LṳNG-GIA offers us a thoroughgoing idealism along with the message of self-realization. And this has been the point of discussion as referred to before among the Buddhist exegetists who wished to decide which was the more important topic of the sutra. Whatever this may be, we are now prepared to see what is the philosophical ground of the Buddhist experience. Historically, the LṳNG-GIA has been considered as an exposition of the following subjects: the 5 dharmas, 3 svabhavas, 8 vijnanas, and 2 nairatmyas. Buddhist scholars, Indian, Chinese, and Japanese were always quite inclined to what may be termed a numerical method or analysis. The whole text was first analyzed into so many I1 arts, and each part again into so many sections, and so on. And the important ideas developed in them were picked up and gathered up numerically in order, 1, 2, 3, and so on. They often thus failed to see one central thought running through the text. Like the mountaineer whose attention is constantly arrested by the details in his way and fails to take in the mountain as a whole. Now, the LṳNG-GIA's philosophy is absolute idealism, and all these numerical headings are details used to establish the main theme. But I will here first discuss each subject separately and then arrange it so as to bring out the whole system in a more centralist shape. The 5 dharmas. To begin with, dharma is a very troublesome word to handle properly, and yet at the same time it is one of the most essential technical terms in Buddhism. As it is used in many different senses, the serious business of a translator or a commentator is to know exactly what the term means in a given context. Etymologically, it comes from the root dhri, to hold, to bear, to exist. There seems always to be something of the idea to endure also going along with it. The commonest and most important sense given to it in Buddhism is truth, law, religion, as exemplified in saddharrna, dharmakaya, dharmacakra, dharmaparya, etc. Secondly, it is used in the sense of existence, being, object, or thing, as, for instance, in sari dharniasunyata, dharmanairatmya, etc. Thirdly, it is synonymous with virtue, righteousness, norm, not only in the ethical sense, but in the intellectual one also. In the latter case, it is truth, standard, category, or a general name for a class of things or ideas. Fourthly, it is occasionally used in a most comprehensive way, including all the senses mentioned above, and it is in this case that we feel inclined so often to leave the original untranslated rather than to seek for an equivalent in a foreign language. For example, when dharma and adharma are contrasted, dharma is here used most evidently in its widest connotation. It is not especially the Buddha's teaching, nor is it a moral standard set up against unrighteousness, nor does it refer to existence generally. In fact, it includes all these. The term may be understood to mean anything of which something can be asserted. And its opposite adharma means everything that negates the affirmation, logical or ontological, or merely physical or ethical. Dharma and adharma are used in this sense toward the end of the first chapter of the LṳNG-GIA. Sarvadharma may be regarded as being just as comprehensive in its significance. Indeed, it may even include adharma as well as dharma, for adharma, too, is a dharma so far as it is another form of assertion. Sarvadharma is interchangeable with sarvabhava. Still another comprehensive use of dharma may be found in Buddha dharma. For this includes not only all the teachings that go in the name of the Buddha but all the activities institutions, physical objects, mental operations, and indeed everything that is connected with Buddhism in any possible manner. Thus Buddha Dharma may come to include the entire universe and all that is found there. The Dharma in the 5 dharmas may approximately be rendered as category. The 5 categories are name, appearance, discrimination, right knowledge, and suchness. Those who are desirous of attaining to the spirituality of the Tathagata are urged to know what these 5 categories are. They are unknown to ordinary minds and, as they are unknown, the latter judge wrongly and become attached to appearances. Now names are not real things, they are merely symbolical, they are not worth getting attached to as realities. Ignorant minds move along the stream of unreal constructions, thinking all the time that there are really such things as me and mine. They keep tenacious hold of these imaginary objects, over which they learn to cherish greed, anger, and infatuation, altogether veiling the light of wisdom. These passions lead to actions, which, being repeated, go on to weave a cocoon for the agent himself. He is now securely imprisoned in it and is unable to free himself from the encumbering thread of wrong judgments. He drifts along on the ocean of transmigration, and, like the derelict, he must follow its currents. He is again compared to the water-drawing wheel turning around the same axle all the time. He never grows or develops, he is the same old blindly groping sin-committing blunderer. Owing to this infatuation, he is unable to see that all things are like Maya, mirage, or like a lunar reflection in water. He is unable to free himself from the false idea of self-substance, of me and mine, of subject and object, of birth, staying and death. He does not realize that all these are creations of mind and wrongly interpreted. For this reason he finally comes to cherish such notions as vara, time, atom, and pradhana, and becomes so inextricably involved in appearances that he can never be freed from the wheel of ignorance. By appearances are meant qualities belonging to sense objects such as visual, olfactory, etc. And by discrimination is meant the naming of all these objects and qualities, distinguishing one from another. The text reads, "Then again, O Mahamedi, discrimination is that by which names are set up. Expressions are given to appearances, saying, this is such and not otherwise. And pradhana is a kind of the primary germ, which, according to the Sikya philosophy, becomes the cause of all material appearances. We have names such as elephant, horse, wheel, footman, woman, or man, wherein discrimination takes place. Right knowledge consists in rightly comprehending the nature of names and appearances as predicating or determining each other. It consists in seeing mind as not agitated by external objects, in not being carried away by dualism such as nihilism and eternalism, and in not falling into the state of Sravakahood and Pratyeka Buddhahood as well as into the position of the philosopher. When a world of names and appearances is surveyed by the eye of right knowledge, the realization is achieved that they are to be known as neither non-existent nor existent, that they are in themselves above the dualism of assertion and refutation, and that the mind abides in a state of absolute tranquility undisturbed by names and appearances. With this is attained with the state of suchness, and because in this condition no images are reflected, the bodhisattva experiences joy. The 3 forms of knowledge. The 3 forms of knowledge known as Svabhava Lakshanatraya are more or less a recapitulation or reclassification of the 5 dharmas. Svabhava or Svakava literally means self-nature, self-sutance, or existence as it is in itself, and Lakshata is the characteristic mark or marks that distinguish one thing from another. The combination thus literally understood looks as if it had nothing to do with knowledge. The meaning, however, is this: that as existence is conceived or cognized by mind, it allows itself to be understood in 3 different and characteristic ways, and that each of these 3 ways of understanding or 3 views of existence is taken as final and true to the self-nature of existence by those who may hold that particular view. Thus, the phrase Svabhavalakshana may apply to the nature of knowledge itself and also to its object, that is, to existence in general. The motive underlying the classification is to see what knowledge or view of existence is required for the attainment of the truth that brings release from the pain and bondage of existence. And the three characteristic marks so called will more properly describe the nature of knowledge than that of its object. Svabhava in this case is to be understood as an epistemological term. The first of the three svabhavas is known as the parikalpita, wrong discrimination of judgment, and proceeds from rightly comprehending the nature of objects, internal as well as externa, and also the relationship existing between objects as independent individuals or as belonging to a genus. The second is the paratantra, literally, depending on another, is a knowledge based on some fact, which is not, however, in correspondence with the real nature of existence. The characteristic feature of this knowledge is that it is not altogether a subjective creation produced out of pure nothingness, but it is a construction of some objective reality on which it depends for material. Therefore, its definition is that which arises depending upon a support or basis. And it is due to this knowledge that all kinds of objects, externa and internal, are recognized, and in these individuality and generality are distinguished. The paratantra is thus equivalent to what we nowadays call relative knowledge or relativity, while the parikalpita is the fabrication of one's own imagination or mind. In the dark a man steps on something, and imagining it to be a snake is frightened. This is parikalpita, a wrong judgment or an imaginative construction, attended with an unwarranted excitement. He now bends down and examines it closely and finds it to be a piece of rope. This is paratantra, relative knowledge. He does not know what the rope really is and thinks it to be a reality, individual and ultimate. While it may be difficult to distinguish sharply the parikalpita from the paratantra from these brief statements or definitions, the latter seems to have at least a certain degree of truth as regards objects themselves. But the former implies not only an intellectual mistake but some effective functions set in motion along with the wrong judgment. When an object is perceived as an object existing externally or internally and determinable under the categories of particularity and generality, the paratantra form of cognition takes place. Accepting this as real, the mind elaborates on it further both intellectually and effectively, and this is the parikalpita form of knowledge. It may be after all more confusing to apply our modern ways of thinking to the older ones, especially when these were actuated purely by religious requirements and not at all by any disinterested philosophical ones. The third form of knowledge is the paranishpanna, perfected knowledge, and corresponds to the right knowledge and suchness of the five dharmas. It is the knowledge that is available when we reach the state of self-realization by going beyond names and appearances and all forms of discrimination or judgment. It is suchness itself, it is the tathagata garbhahridya, it is something indestructible. The rope is now perceived in its true perspective. It is not an object constructed out of causes and conditions and now lying before us as something externa. From the absolutist's point of view, which is assumed by the LØNG-GIA, the rope is a reflection of our own mind, it has no objectivity apart from the latter, it is in this respect non-existent. But the mind out of which the whole world evolves is the object of the paranishpanna, perfectly attained knowledge. The following gathas are translated from the Sanskrit text, where the relation of the three svabhavas is treated somewhat in detail. This is one of the difficult series of the gatpas to be found in the LØNG-GIA, for the meaning is obscure. I have given here my interpretation of it rather than a translation, which latter when reproduced as it stands in the original would be quite unintelligible to the average reader. This series of gathas is broken up into 5 sections and is reproduced with more or less variations in the Sagathakam part of the sutra. The gathas run thus. When the mind is bound by an objective world, the intelligence is awakened and reasoning takes place. But the highest wisdom obtains where there are no images, a higher level of consciousness. Owing to the parikalpita conception of existence, it appears real. From the paratantra point of view, there is no such reality. The parikalpita discrimination holds good as long as there is a state of confusion. In the paratantra view of existence, there is no subjective discrimination. Though a variety of things may be produced by Maya, there is no validity in them. So also in the parikalpita discrimination, which causes the multiplicity of appearances, there is no validity. Appearance is due to the evil way of the past, the effect of a fettered mind. It becomes for the ignorant the object of their parikalpita conception, which is formed on the paratantra relative nature of things. Existence of which the parikalpita conception is formed by the ignorant has the nature of relativity. And it is as regards this relative nature of existence that the discrimination creates multitudinous appearances. There is worldly knowledge, sovereignty, and ultimate truth, and a third is the doctrine of causelessness. The parikalpita belongs to worldly knowledge. When it is cut asunder, there is revealed the realm of the wise. As in the case of the magician who reveals multiplicity out of oneness, though there is really no multiplicity, so is the nature of the parikalpita view of existence. As with cataract of the eye, which makes one imagine various forms though the cataract itself has nothing to do with forms or no forms. So is the relative nature of existence to the unenlightened. Like unto pure gold, water free from dirt, and the sky clear of clouds, pure is the nature of the discriminated. There is no reality as discriminated in the parikalpita view of the world, but relativity itself exists. Assertion and refutation are done away with, which are the products of discrimination. If the parikalpita is non-existent because of the nature of relativity, what is existent has no existence, and what is existent is produced from non-existence. Depending upon the parikalpita, discrimination there obtains relativity. From the relationship of names and appearances there rises the parikalpita discrimination.